Welcome to some summary judgment. Weird. My stream seems to not be super behaving. That's really annoying. Well, I think it'll be fine. Anyway, I'm going to continue. If you've noticed, I've been doing a few episodes of summary judgment. It's been about one a week at the moment. Probably keep something close to that pace. We'll see how my time goes and content and whatnot. But today I wanted to talk about another hero. He's another favorite of mine. And I say that as if they aren't all favorites. But this one is... sorry, getting ahead of myself. Before we get too far... I don't know why this is showing as yellow. My thing here is showing as green. Before we get too far down the path here... something I do want to throw out there is just to keep in mind that these are just the opinions of a guy who really likes this game, finds it fun, and is probably not at the tippy top of competitive play in it. I'm just sort of telling you what I see that they do and some things that excite me and why I like the game, etc., etc. So just keep that in mind. I'll probably give this caveat in every one of these videos, and that's fine. So anyways, Skoll Bonestorm. Before I read the card, I'm going to talk about the model for a second. So it'll become apparent in this model, but Skoll is an Ettin Mystic who's a defender. So that actually does start down my road. But what I want to point out is Skoll is affected. He's an Ettin, so he has two heads. The model has two heads, and some of the design space for this particular model is that. Like you can sort of choose which path you want to go down as far as when you're leveling up, which side of the head basically you're leveling up, either, and we'll go over that of course, but either the mystic side or the warrior side. So bear that in mind. This one will be a little bit different. All right, looks like my stream's good now. Okay, so Skoll Bonestorm, an Ettin Mystic Defender. They are Soul Harvest 4, Movement 4, Agility 3, Resilience 1, Melee 5, as mentioned, Defender. Just for reference, I did put a link to the print and play, so you can find the card there. We're going off of the current card, of course. I'm actually using the Android app to look at the card myself, but you can go out there. Anyways, Skoll has a Great Axe, which is a melee weapon that costs a single action. It has a 2-inch range, and its damage is 2/3/4. Skoll has 21 damage boxes at level 1, which is the most in the game, and he gains three damage boxes for each additional level. So maxed out, you're looking at 27 damage, which is the most, I believe, and I'd have to go check, but I believe this is the most damage in the game. Most hit points in the game. Okay, and then... going to the back of the card, the innate abilities. The first one is just Orc at Heart. So we talked about this in my overview video, but there's only 5 races. There's Minotaurs, Orcs, Humans, Elves, and Dwarves. And one of the things for just game rules balance and whatnot is, I think even though he's an Ettin, they want to make sure that he belongs to one of those races so that they're not getting a bunch of extra races to track down for weird things that happen with the rules. And there's also there's some models that do buff your output of orcs, and so that's just something to keep in mind here. So for rules purposes, Skoll's an orc. Okay. He has dual wield Great Axe, and I think that's actually specified. And I'm gonna actually scroll down to the bottom because the dual wield rules are actually on the extra card. But dual wield says only the first attack of a charge will receive the +2 attack dice pool bonus. Can only be triggered during this model's activation and cannot trigger another dual wield attack. And then you have -1 attack pool dice for the second attack. So what this does mean is I think they must specify a little bit more. Anyways, for each one attack that Skoll takes, he can take another one at a penalty. That's what that's saying. So but if you charge in, only the the first attack is part of the charge. So you charge, you get an attack, and then you get a lesser attack. Has the model has the rule 2 heads. This model cannot suffer the stun condition, and while resolving parting blows against the model, enemy models do not gain the extra attack dice granted by parting blow. So just something to keep in mind there. And then active abilities. They have Bulwark, which is a single action. Target a friendly non-defender hero model within 4 inches, and it gains 5 temporary hit points. Or health. I think they just call it health. Damage dealt to target model is marked against temporary health first. If remaining temporary health is removed at the start of this... any remaining temporary health is removed at the start of this model's next activation. And then finally, Soul Burn, which is an action and a fate. Enemy models within 3 inches of this model suffer d6 true damage. And I don't know if we talked about this before, but true damage means it ignores resilience. Per soul bound to them, and roll separately for each. We'll just go through the abilities. Let's assume for a second that you level up on the Mystic side. So level 2 for the Mystic, you gain the activated ability of Mesmerizing Gaze, which is a single action, and whilst within 4 inches of this model, the active abilities on the enemy models cost an additional 1 action. Expires at the start of this model's next activation. And then at level 3, you get Primal Screen, which is a single fate. Whilst within 4 inches of this model, innate abilities of enemy models cannot be used. Expires at the start of this model's next activation. And then on the warrior side, you've got Combo Strike, which is an active ability. It costs 2 actions, and you can make an attack versus an enemy model. The damage changes to 3, 5, 6. You get 1 additional dice to your dice pool, and you also gain a an attack. He doesn't actually have any of these, so I've forgotten the name of it. You gain a let me look somewhere else. It's not active. Combat maneuver. Sorry, team. Couldn't remember there what I was trying to say. You gain a combat maneuver of Knockout, which costs 2 symbols. Enemy model damaged by Combo Strike suffers the knocked down and stunned conditions. And then at level 3 for the warrior side, Mystic Shield, which is target-friendly non-defender model within 4 inches. That model is immune to either ranged or magic chosen by the active player attacks, and the damage effects of the chosen type, and expires at the end of the model's next turn. Just some reminders. Combo Strike does not trigger the dual wield. That's kind of the whole point. But you can charge and do it. Goes over what Knockdown does here. And just since we haven't really talked about it, Knockdown is an incredible rule in this game. The enemy model suffers -3 agility, minimum of 1. Must forfeit an action to stand up. Cannot perform parting blows. Cannot engage an enemy model, and has a height of 1. And stunned is 1 less action. We also haven't talked about this, but you can spend a single fate to shake 1 effect, but this is going to be applying 2, so unless you have some other way to shake an effect, like via another hero or something, you're going to be losing at least 1 action from that behavior. Plus being knocked down just makes it easier for you to do other things. And this goes over Skoll's levels, so I sort of talked about this, but I'll read it anyways. When Skoll gains level 2, the owning player chooses which head they want to level up, the Mystic or the Warrior. They then gain access to the level 2 ability appropriate to the head they choose. Once a head is chosen for level 2, the same head must gain the next level. The other head cannot level up for the rest of the game. So, and then it just talks about the paths. So Skoll. As I mentioned, Skoll's sort of defensive realm that he lives in is hit points. He's just a high hit point warrior. His resilience is pretty average. His agility is pretty average. His attack is a little below average, honestly, if I looked across the game. His Soul Harvest is okay. 4 is pretty high is like the highest warriors tend to get. A few others are at 4. 4 is close enough that you kind of might maybe do it sometimes. Bulwark is definitely the defensive effect here that you're looking to gain advantage for. And it's going to work particularly well to keep Some of those heroes that are going to go in a little bit more. Basically, all the warriors, we haven't talked about any of the other ones before. All of them, I think all of them have some sort of ability that helps keep other members of your party or of your warband alive. Skoll's is temporary hit points. We'll see later there's some armor, and there's like taking some hits, and there's another one that's armor. I kind of think of it as hit points. I kind of think of it as a shield. If you've ever played any MOBAs, like I play Heroes of the Storm and like Tassadar, Zarya, they both have shields, and like I sort of think of what he's doing as sort of a shield, right? I'm giving you extra capacity to take damage, rather than there's other, like I said, when I get to other videos and talk about other defenders, we'll talk about other things. So he's actually a hero that's changed quite a bit. So one of the reasons for this hero was he was actually created by somebody who backed the first Kickstarter, which is, we're going to only go through the Kickstarter one here until the next one's out, who backed that Kickstarter, and this was one of the heroes they won. I think it was 2 guys that went halvesies on it, so this was a pretty cool way to use that up. Skoll, one of the nice things about Skoll is, in my opinion, you don't really need to be too concerned with leveling him up. I think the combo strike, I personally think that the combo strike ability is more impactful, but I haven't really played. It actually used to be a level 1 ability for him, and Bulwark was a level 2, and I really like that the switch is there, because I feel like you always wanted the Bulwark with him, so you sort of always went the warrior route, and now I think it's at least tempting to go both routes. But like I said, he's not a hero. One of the nice things about him is he's not a hero that really needs to use a lot of fate. Soulburn's nice. Primal Scream could be good. Mystic Shield could theoretically also be good. But those abilities are all, they're very powerful, but they're all not, like, I don't think for him to do what he needs to do that he really needs to level up. So that's, you get hit points actually, which is really big at him. But again, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's good, just not necessary. And he actually, so only having a melee of 5 is not super great, but if you can get any way to get his melee up a lot higher, and this is sort of something that comes up in MOBAs as well, where to an extent warriors, this is true in HOTS, so I don't want to speak for League, I don't want to speak for Dota, I haven't played them, but there's a point to where if your warrior is not doing enough at the front of the line, either in crowd control or in damage, you can just ignore them and sort of like walk past them, right? Because who cares? This model isn't, or this hero or champion or whatever it is, isn't scary, right? Why do I care? I'm just going to walk past you to the squishy backside. So if you've got crowd control, great. I mean, sort of, and that would translate in this game to like knockdown, stun, etc., etc. Powerful parting blows, etc., or damage. Again, like now I don't want to walk past and risk a parting blow because it's going to do a lot of damage, etc., etc. So, so that's kind of one of the things. If you're not somewhat scary, even though you have these defensive abilities, you're hard to kill. You're helping your team not die. It kind of doesn't matter if you can't at least do a little bit of damage. Like, we're not expecting you to do so much damage that you're like outclassing your aggressors or assassins in some games, or whoever's the damage dealer is in the game you play, but you want to do enough that you aren't, that if they ignore you, that you won't do some serious damage. And Skoll sort of fits that bill, right? Melee 5 is not great, and obviously it's going to be reduced for the multiple attacks, because the biggest way you're going to get a lot of damage out of him is by just generating a significant number of attacks. And if you can pair him up in a situation where you have somebody like Bastion, who is probably one of the strongest combos with Skoll. Bastion has the 3-inch melee, so now he's going to get +1 for a friend being there, so now we're up to melee 6. If you can then add in the additional what do I want to say? The additional melee bonus I just blanked on his name, that Bastion brings. And we'll talk about Bastion in another video. He's a really cool hero as well. So now you've got something where you're getting +2. Really even just getting flank is taking you melee 6. Getting some other bonus from somewhere. I don't know that you'd really give him the Vorpal Sword, but maybe if you really need him to do damage, Vorpal Blade. I think it's Vorpal Blade. That's one of the offensive artifacts. That's certainly a possibility. You might just have another aggressor that's in there with you, trying to mix things up. If you can get any sort of like knockdown or anything like that, like now he's, if you can engineer a knockdown before he goes, now you're going to be able to, you know, even at the -1, he's rolling. Most things are no higher than it. So like an Agility 4 model, you're rolling even as it is if they're knocked down 4 dice every attack. 3 dice for the first one, or 4 dice for the first one, 3 for the second one. You can actually put a pretty significant amount of damage out with him if you like when you can engineer it, basically. At the same time as being really tanky, and then on top of it using Bulwark to try to keep someone safe. And then you have the additional utility if you go the warrior route and you do get to level 2, which is probably his most important level, if depending on the composition you have, that knockdown effect. Basically, when you see an attack like that costs 2 actions, so this will be true when we talk about Thrommel later as well, and it says you have to damage, I think he damages minimum of 3, and the only hero that has a resilience of 3 is Donrakar, and he can't be knocked down when he has that anyways. And you're really not like looking. I don't think that's a tactic you want to try to take with him. So you're not gonna anything you need to knock down, you will damage. So it's a pretty reliable effect because you can just deal 3 or 4 or whatever the minimum was that I said, and then use and hope for symbols. Like 1J, 1 symbol, 1 hit is going to actually be plenty to knock something down, and then if, you know, depending again on your composition. So yeah, in my opinion, he's really good. Resilience 1 is okay. The hit points, like I said, are very good. Bastion also doubles up there because he can heal Skoll, so now you've got Skoll healing, and like they just do really well together. I think also that he's an orc. Just note, we haven't talked about Cruel yet, but Cruel gives orcs additional damage, so you get all those attacks, and getting that +1 damage can really add up. And those are pretty much the natural synergies with him. I think he's a really fun model. I think he's definitely one you want to have in your repertoire. I think that honestly, all the defenders I think are worth having because there's actually only 4 in the original game, and they only released 1 additional defender with the second Kickstarter, and there's some pseudo defenders. So speaking of that, some of the pseudo defender type models are actually really great with him. So a Piper we talked about last video is not actually a defender, but you can kind of use him in a tanky sort of role. And one of the things that allows you to do is there's all of these defenders have abilities that specifically say they don't work on other defenders, and the reason for that is you would end up with just like this unkillable mess that you don't like, would be a very unfun game. And so as a result, these abilities say non-defender. But when you have someone like Piper who you're using in that, like, in a defensive way, which you may not need to if you have Skoll, but in some cases you might want to, where if you can give him those 5 temporary hit points and get his after like giving him either he could have a thing that increases his agility and his other stats, or he could also possibly have duplicate self up, or you could have even given him an item that gives him more defensive capabilities, and then you're going to be able to give him these hit points. So that's just something to keep in mind. I would say also that applies to someone like Cavardo, who's a little bit tanky. You can sort of use Brock in a pinch, actually, to be a little bit tanky in a spot if you need to with someone like this. So there's a lot of really fun abilities like that. Just keep an eye out for when they're not defenders. You might be able to make something tankier than your opponent is really anticipating. So hopefully again another. This was I asked the Judgement Discord about which one to do, and they picked Skoll. So Skoll's definitely one of the guys that I'm looking to get some time with once I can get a few more games in here again. I need to schedule. So if you're local to Chicago, I just blanked. Chicagoland. There's a Chicagoland Judgement group. Feel free to join that. And then I just blanked the shop up in Schaumburg. Grognard Games. There it is. Has some players, and I just need to make it up there one of these times. I missed their last tournament, so. Anyways, hopefully that was helpful about Skoll. Maybe it got you excited to play him too, and we'll see you for some more Judgement later.